Welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. It's good to have you here this evening. We're doing a live stream in the evening. It's actually 7 Eastern where I am. And I thought this would be kind of a fun format, try to do something a little bit later in the evening. And I happen to have a guest on the podcast who I'll introduce here in just a little bit, whose schedule worked best for an evening session or an evening show like this. And so we're going to do just that. I'm looking forward to it. If you are listening to this after the fact, we are live streaming all of our Bokeh Podcast episodes. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Bokeh Podcast so that you can keep up to date with the next upcoming live streams. And if you are watching or listening live, make sure that you ask questions, comment, send us funny emojis even if you would like to. Feel free to engage. We want this to be a group discussion. And one other note here before I introduce our special edition of the Bokeh Podcast tonight, I do want to continue to encourage you to look for opportunities to give back as I do on a regular basis. On each episode, actually, at the beginning of each episode, I mentioned Charity Water. Charity Water is an organization that I donate to regularly. In fact, I promised our listeners that I would do so before each and every Bokeh Podcast episode. And so I did it again today. You saw the receipt there on the screen. But I just want to share that for the sake of encouraging you to look for opportunities to give, whether it's in your local community or to national or international organizations. There's so many needs out there, and it's amazing how even just a little bit of money can go a long way. All right. Well, on that note, I want to introduce our special edition of the Bokeh Podcast this evening. This is a brand position consultation. And I just briefly, I'm going to introduce brand position or the concept of brand position to you here before I introduce my guest. I told our guest, whose wonderful name, by the way, is Sunshine. I was like, I don't want to interrupt, or I don't want to introduce you and then interrupt you again with another monologue. So just briefly, I want to introduce the concept of brand position before I introduce Sunshine. And brand position, very simply, is the value proposition that your business represents in your marketplace. If somebody says, what do you offer or what need do you meet? Ideally, you can answer that question with a very simple statement that not only communicates the service that you offer, how it's distinct, and ultimately how it stands out in your marketplace in comparison to those who we might call competition. I know that our industry has really embraced this concept of community over competition, but at the end of the day, a potential client looks at us as just another photographer. We need to be able to stand out amidst all the photographers in our marketplace. And so having a brand position, a clear and distinct brand position and brand position statement enables us to stand out above the rest. Very quickly, getting very excited here. Benefits of a clear and distinct brand position before I introduce Sunshine this evening. 4 distinct benefits, and enables potential clients to immediately know your unique value proposition, especially if you place it in the right place on your website. We're going to talk more about that here in just a little bit. But that's the first benefit. If somebody comes to your website or they land on your social media profile, they immediately know the benefit, the UVP that your business offers to that marketplace. But secondly, and as a result of having that message there, plain and obvious right there for them to read when they land on your website, when they land on your social media profile. The second benefit is that it filters irrelevant clients. If they read that position statement, they're like, you know what? I don't know. This person just doesn't line up with what I'm looking for. They can go the other direction. If that statement resonates with them, then naturally they're going to spend a little bit more time on the website and hopefully reach out, maybe set up an appointment and potentially book you as well. The third benefit is that it simplifies and focuses marketing efforts. If you know this big idea that your brand represents, then now marketing that message, everything that you do in your marketing, whatever the platform, whatever way you're marketing to potential clients, it is going to be much more focused because you know the specific and distinct message that your brand is built around. And then as a result, the fourth benefit is that having a clear and distinct brand position statement or brand position, it encourages better time management. How does it encourage better time management? Well, naturally, if you're focused on one thing, if your business is built around this one idea that is your brand position, then you can ignore those things that aren't important. It's so easy to get distracted as business owners, right? This idea and that workshop and this lens and that Lightroom preset and all these different things can potentially distract us. But if we know what it is that we're trying to achieve and what our brand is about, then it's naturally going to help us manage our time more efficiently. We focus on those things that support that brand position, and we can ignore the rest. So those are the benefits of not only a brand position, but a clear and distinct brand position. And I just wanted to share that as an introduction here this evening before I introduce my brand new guest, and I'm going to bring her on with me now. Let me see if I can push the right buttons to do just that. All right, here we go. Sunshine Miller's here with me. Sunshine, thank you for making time. Actually, I should say not only making time, certainly, but also just letting us air this conversation for the sake of everybody. I appreciate you letting us do that. Can you hear me, Sunshine? Are you still there? Oh, there we go.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
I hear you now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it looks like we have some guests. I have to go full screen here for everybody because you've got some friends in the background. Well, a couple of them are missing at the moment. Some cats and dogs joining the party this evening. Oh, there we have a head picking. That's awesome. It's going to be a party tonight. All right.
Yeah.
But I want to keep the conversation going because we've got a lot to cover here. And as I mentioned to you before we got started, and certainly we'll kind of dig into this a little bit further, you've already got a pretty strong brand. But if you will, just go ahead and briefly introduce what you do as a photographer and what the name of your company, where you're based, just briefly to our listeners before we get into this refinement of your brand position.
Right. So I'm Natural Sunshine Photography. I'm a Smoky Mountain photographer based in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'm mostly just doing families and couples at the moment, a few weddings, but that's not really what I want to do in the future.
Sure. Okay. So families, couples, and I want to kind of explore what that even means here in just a second, because I know there's so many different directions you can go with family portraiture, couples photography. Usually couples photography has some type of romantic connotation, potentially leads to weddings, as you just talked about. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. And mention the marketplace that you're based in one more time.
Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Okay. So I'm actually in Chattanooga. You may know this already, but I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee area. So I'm only about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from Gatlinburg. I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time there over the years, actually. It's actually, aside from the like super touristy parts, it's one of the most beautiful areas, of course, in the Smoky Mountains. In Tennessee. It's absolutely stunning place. So you're super lucky to be able to get to photograph there. And I'm actually going to pull up your website here really quick because for those of you that want to go take a look, naturalsunshinephotography.com, just like it sounds, you can see an example or many examples actually of Sunshine's beautiful work and of course photographed in these natural, just beautiful, beautiful natural scenes. It's really stunning stuff. Do you ever get tired of it? Because it seems like it'd be hard to. It's so stunning.
I was born and raised here, so I love the mountains.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite things. So that's why I got the permit to shoot in the park, and that's mainly where all my sessions take place at.
Well, and so this is interesting that you bring this up because I was doing a little bit of research yesterday on your competition, the other photographers in your marketplace. And I noticed that talking about that permit, that license is a thing. That's like, and I don't think I've ever seen this before in the 20 years or whatever that I've been in the industry. I know that, and of course I've had to do this before. You get permission or you get a certificate or whatever if you have to photograph in this place or that place. But photographers are putting it on their website as though it's like this medal of honor that they have this certificate, this license that they can actually photograph in the Smoky Mountains National Park. Why is it such a big deal?
Right. There's a lot of people photographing in the park, and you can only photograph up to like a fourth of a mile up a trail. So there's a lot of people taking people on expeditions in the park, and they're not really allowed to.
Okay.
So a lot of us, I feel like, put that in there. So maybe we get in clients' minds that even if they don't pick us, they should ask somebody else if they have the permit, just to make sure there was somebody who.
Well, I'd never seen this before. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating to look through all these photographers' websites. And that was like one of the first things mentioned, or you might see a badge on their site. I found it really interesting, but nonetheless, great that you have the license and great that you have access to this kind of beautiful scenery. I would eat it up. Some of my most favorite places to photograph engagement sessions in particular was in more natural scenery. I thought it was just, especially around sunset, you got this gorgeous light and a big field. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but man, I loved it. I think the stuff that's just kind of scrolling across your website actually as we're talking here is beautiful. So anyway, props to you for that. You talked already briefly about the type of photographic services that you offer. So you said you shoot the occasional wedding and then couples and families. So families is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you're talking about families of all types, right? Age ranges, big families, small families, et cetera. What does that look like?
Yeah, I've shot up to about, I think, 20-person families, and I like to keep it 15 and under. That's why I don't like doing weddings either. I like really small, intimate type sessions.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. So that's something to know. By the way, I have a pen here. You may occasionally see me look down at my notebook. I'm making a note as we're talking. It looks like your sunset is like just making you
Yeah,
glow at the moment.
I know.
That's crazy. No, that's fun. Okay. So, but we have the family photography, and you said you like to photograph smaller groups, more intimate family sessions. And then the couples photography, is this for any particular, like is it for engagement sessions specifically, or just any couples that want to be photographed?
Any couples that want to be photographed. So most of my clientele actually comes from Facebook and the I Love Smoky Mountain groups. I'm part of about 20 of those.
Okay.
So people are always wanting updated pictures, but in the mountains.
In the mountains. Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
it could be for a special occasion. It could be just they're spending a couple of days there. They want pictures
Right.
specifically for couples. And okay. And then family sessions. And then the weddings, is that just something you happen to pick up occasionally for some extra cash, or is it how do you get those weddings?
I get inquiries through my site, and since we're the second to Las Vegas with weddings, there's so many weddings that happen all the time, and
Yeah.
they're really easy to get. So if I just have the time to do it, I'll do it as long as it's smaller.
That makes sense. You know, what was interesting to me, I mean, one of the probably the most popular search phrase in Google, and we'll get to this in a little bit. I'll kind of build on this and explain where I'm coming from, but is Gatlinburg, or let's see, Gatlinburg, Tennessee photographer. Is that what it is? Or photographer, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And what was really interesting to me is especially considering how popular weddings are in that marketplace, was how few photographers were coming out strong as wedding photographers in Gatlinburg. Like that position, that strong position statement, I'm not sure that I actually saw somebody specifically like just own that space in that area.
Right.
Now, to be clear, there are certainly some wedding photographers and they talk about it, but as popular as weddings are, as you said, like second only to Vegas, it seems like there would be people really trying to own weddings, but I guess they just fall in the laps of photographers if they call themselves a photographer.
I get about maybe 5 inquiries a month,
Okay.
and if they're bigger, I just don't like to. I like small, intimate sessions, so I don't like to have to deal with the big mess of a wedding day.
Sure. Now, so you do have elopement on your website, I noticed in the navigation. Is that, are you wanting to continue to do elopements, or do you really want to try to narrow down?
I don't know. And I know I need to price my elopements probably different than my regular photography because that's how most photographers do it in the area. Which I'm actually doing an engagement session next weekend. That's kind of going to be kind of like an elopement. So I would still like to do that intimate stuff, but as long as it's not more than 10 people, then
Okay.
that's kind of my cutoff.
Okay. But really families and couples are the focus. And I guess
Right.
to that end, what percentage of your business is families versus couples at this point?
I would say 75% family probably, and then 25% couples. But most families, when I do their pictures, they section off into, mom and dad, and then whoever's together in their
Okay.
groups.
But nonetheless, families is about 75%, you said.
hmm
That's interesting. Okay. So we're going to come back to that here in just a little bit. What would you say at this point, I mean, in comparison to the other photographers in your market, makes your work distinct? Is there something that you can kind of just run with as I do this thing and nobody else does?
Um, Besides one other person, I think I'm the most true to color natural photographer in the area. And most
Okay.
people are dark and moody or very light and airy. So I think
Interesting.
I'm kind of in the middle, along with one other who I know is not like my competition. I mean, it is competition, but
Sure. No,
one
well,
who compares close that people
yeah.
would probably decide between me and her.
Yeah, again, I love the fact that our industry has embraced this community over competition concept, and it's a wonderful thing. I think it should continue. In fact, we were a big part of that. I say we, myself and my business partner, were a big part of that movement years and years ago when it started to become a thing. Here in the small Chattanooga, Tennessee market, it was funny because we were like, we wanted to make friends with everybody. And at that time, and this is, I mean, I started about 20 years ago. At that time, it was not a thing. Like photographers they're like, wait a minute, who are these people? And why are they charging these prices? And, our style was different. And so we had to kind of work to break into some of those friendships. But now, of course, it's a normal thing. I think it's wonderful. But the reality that we have to remember, and by the way, a lot of the things I'm going to say today aren't necessarily directed at you specifically. You may know some of these things, but for our listeners and viewers as well, what we have to keep in mind is the competition, or the so-called competition in our marketplace. They are just that, in the sense that they are competing for our potential clients' attention. And so we just have to figure out how to grab the attention of our potential client. And in that sense, they are competition. I know that most of us don't have any, ill will or ill feelings or whatever. We're going to get together and have coffee with other photographers. I think that's great, but we also have to keep in mind that potential clients are going to see us a little bit differently than that. So all that to say, as far as the look and feel of your images, which by the way, as I pulled up in your website here, in fact, I'll do it really quickly again, are definitely warm, very, very much like the true to life colors, but this vibrant, it feels really good to look at them in that sense, like just really warm and friendly. And of course, great emotion from your subjects as well, but it's the processing isn't over the top. And I think that's great. I'll go ahead and throw this caveat in though, since we're talking about it right now. It's a little tough to run on a position statement for the long haul. And especially as it relates to search engine optimization, SEO, and thinking about what clients are actually searching for, it's tough to run on an editing style. There's no question that dark and moody, light and airy. We see all these trends kind of come through our industry. How long have you been shooting now, Sunshine?
Since December 19.
Okay, so you just got started. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. I love it. And you're going for it. I mean, your work is stunning. So, I mean, you've obviously got a thing for this, but when you look at the industry, and I have been in it for about 20 years, I've seen trends come and go. And because trends come and go, if we try to build a brand position around an editing style, which literally next year could go out the door, like next year, it may not be popular anymore. Next year, you may want to change it. I think back to, I still remember this time really specifically. I sat down in my studio space, my office area that I would meet with clients in, and picked up an engagement album that I had sitting on the table, a coffee table that clients would come in and look at. And I started flipping through that album one day, and I was like, oh my word, this is bad. This is really bad. Because I had used on this particular album, I had used what was at the time known as Lomo effect. So I think a lot of people may know what a Lomo or lomography is, a Lomo camera. And it creates this kind of weird cross-process vignette effect on the images. But I had applied that effect on at least some of the images in this album. And now here we were a year or two later, and it looked terrible, right? Because I had a different perspective and the market was doing different things. So all that to say, a lot of photographers put a lot of weight and emphasis on style, and there's something to be said for it. At the very least, it's fun. I love going to Lightroom and applying different presets, and it certainly is important to come up with a consistent look. But at the end of the day, building a position on a style is tough for two reasons. One, because trends come and go. And number two, potential clients, they don't have the same eyes that we do when they're looking at our work. They may look at an image and say, oh, that's beautiful. They can't point out why. And they're not going to be like, oh man, I just love the saturation and the greens and the blues there. And oh, I noticed that beautiful vignette around the outside. And oh, I love the way that 1.8 lens is just blowing the background out. They're not thinking the way that we do, right? That's all stuff that we think and talk about. It's not as important to the client. So all that to say, building a brand around a style, I don't think is a very strong way to go for the long haul because of those two elements. Does that make sense?
Right.
And again, to be clear, you back up what you say, which I think is brilliant. A lot of photographers, they'll have a statement on their site and then images don't match the statement. You're like, you said this, but you're doing this. Photographers will talk about being documentary photographers, for example. And then they have all these posed pictures on their site and you're like, wait, but you said you were a documentary photographer. So your imagery backs up the statement that you currently have on your site, which I'll just jump back to really quick. Capturing genuine moments naturally. I mean, you're doing exactly that. And again, many photographers, if they even have a statement above the fold on the homepage of their site, the way that you do, it doesn't match up with the images. So you're rocking that. You're absolutely rocking it. But the only thing that I would push back on is just what's going to happen over the long run. And so it might be reason to think about adjusting the direction that you're going as far as brand position. For that particular reason. We want sustainability, right? We want to go beyond the trends, whatever is trendy in the moment, because you never know. Even next year, you may be like, you know what, that warm vibe, the true to life vibe that I was applying to my images, I'm not really feeling anymore. I want to go this direction. Are you going to have to change your brand at that point? We want something that's sustainable, if that makes sense.
Right.
Okay, cool. So we'll leave that alone for now. We'll come back to it. And by the way, I think it's great that you have all these pets in the background just like hanging out with us. It's super fun.
Yeah, I'm child free, so I just have pets.
We have 2 dogs and 2 cats?
2 dogs and 4 cats.
4 cats, okay.
The fourth was an accident. I found her on the side of the road. actually when I was going to shoot my anniversary shoot for myself and my husband.
Okay.
So I'm kind of
Well,
black
we
hat on
got a visitor.
Halloween.
Who is
And there,
this?
this is Kiza. He's our second oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
it. All right. Well, let's keep going because we have limited time. Oh, hello. Well, we got those big green eyes.
Yeah. Can you
I
go
love
somewhere, sir? Thank you.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the style, kind of what makes you unique right now. And by the way, the other thing I want to say, in addition to the fact that your work backs up the brand statement or the position statement that you currently have in your site, and it is warm, it's wonderfully warm and friendly and just appealing. I love looking at it. In addition to that, your style does stand out amidst your competition. There are others. I mean, again, having spent quite a bit of time looking through 7 pages, 8 pages worth of
There's a lot of them.
of
Yeah.
Google results. Yeah, I know that was only some of them. I'm sure there were many more. But I saw a lot of photographers, and your work does stand out in that way. The caveat, again, going back to what I said, is that I can see that. I'm a photographer. You can see that. You're a photographer. Most of these clients, they may notice little differences here and there, but they don't have the eye so much that we do. We just have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about how we're positioning ourselves. All right. So continuing on, talk to me about your target customers' biggest pain points. And actually, before we even do that, who is your target customer? How would you describe your target customer?
People who are here on vacation to have fun.
Okay.
I don't really like very strict people because I'm not like a strict person. I like to have fun during a shoot.
Okay.
So
What does that mean? Like, what does it look like that you're not strict?
I don't pose. I mean, you pose people, but then we always do the walk silly and just depending on the person, depends on how I joke around with them, and that's how I get most of my emotion.
That makes sense. Okay.
So if they're fun and they can joke around a little bit,
Yep.
then that's kind of my person.
Okay, cool. So people are visiting. They like to have fun. That's your target market or target customer. And would you say that then that most of, I mean, I know you just said this. I just want to clarify. Most of your clients are visiting. They're not local residents?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of local residents that actually pay for pictures because most of them have a photographer friend in the area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, no, that's good to know, though, because now we know a very specific target market, the people that you're going to be talking to, and that's cool. And you want people that want a fun session, which is also good to know, too, because not everybody is that vibe. I still remember, do we have animals sneezing in the background? Is that the...
We do. That's the husky.
Okay. No, I could just think back to, I had a wide variety of clients over the years, and not everybody was up for fun. So I love that you're shooting for that. And that might actually be something that you can work into the messaging as well. But what would you say those target customers, what is their biggest pain points? And just to give caveat or context rather, for you and those that are listening and watching, it's important to understand the pain point of our target customers so that the position statement speaks to that. The goal with the position statement is that you tell that potential client, I've got your back. I've got you. I'm going to take care of this need or this desire that you have. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So what would you say your target customer's biggest pain points are?
Finding time on their vacation for a session because most people don't want to spend 2 hours in a session when they're here.
Okay.
Most of my sessions are booked on my mini or my 40-minute sessions, which is like my middle. I only offer up to an hour. And I've only had a few people do the hour because most of the kids can't handle sitting around for an hour or two for sessions.
That makes sense. Okay. So speed is an element. And I think maybe we're going to get to this here in just a little bit, but I think I saw you mentioned that your turnaround time and delivery for the images is also fast, right?
Yeah, most of my gallery deliveries within 48 hours of the
That's
session.
incredible. Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious as a photographer and also the editing company owner, like how many images do you walk away with from a session usually?
A 40-minute session, probably, I overshoot and it's a problem that I have, probably about 200. And then I run everything through Aftershoot, which culls them and does all that and takes out the blurry ones. And then I edit from my own preset that I developed partially from Jared Poland's presets.
Okay.
And then I just adjust the temperature and exposure. Since I already pretty much have my style nailed down, it doesn't take me that long to edit.
Okay. And then are you just posting those to an online gallery or how are you delivering them?
Yeah, I use Pixie Set to host my site and my gallery.
Okay. Shout out to Pixie Set. My longtime friend Ross Tanner just began working over there. Ross is a good guy. Pixie Sets, but it's got to be one of the top 3 galleries in the industry at this point. Super popular.
Yeah, and
Okay.
their customer service is really nice too.
Oh,
That's
that's
what I
good
like
to know.
about them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speed is a really important element here, and that might be something that we can build into the messaging. That's pretty interesting. Any other potential pain points aside from time or the importance of speed?
Not that I can think of,
Okay.
honestly.
That's fair enough. No, that's great. Okay. So obviously that pain point or those pain points are something that we want to speak to with a position statement. But then the other thing that we need to think about too, because we're talking about building a brand position, literally, at least from my perspective, everything in your business should center around the brand position. Your business is built around this message, and then ultimately this particular service, the style of service. So we want to make sure that brand position is an accurate reflection of what your goals are as an individual, as a photographer, what it is you're trying to build, like why you even started a photography business in the first place. We want to make sure this brand position supports that, right? So to that end, what would you see would be the top, I don't know, 2 or 3 reasons why you started a photography business?
So up until about 6 months, I was working in law enforcement, which is the corrections side.
Okay.
And I started photography, and then it kind of picked up more than I thought it would.
Hmm.
So I kind of transitioned to a Monday through Friday, weekends off kind of job.
Okay.
And then I started building upon that. And I think at this point, I've bought my like new camera and stuff. So now I just want to pay off some debt and hopefully go full time if I can.
That's
I'm
really
doing
cool.
like way better than I thought I was going to do in the first place. So
So how many sessions do you want to shoot a week ultimately? Like what does going full time look like for you?
I've done my cost of doing business. I think it
Cool.
was like if I was doing it full time, it'd be 3 or 4 days a week because I've adjusted my prices July 1st reflect the prices I would be doing possibly if I was doing full time.
Sure. Yeah.
So
That's a very achievable goal too, especially working in the market that you do. You've got such wonderful access to the tourist industry, and with the way things are opening back up and picking back up, and people are
yeah.
traveling. I think there's really wonderful opportunity there. So that's great. So would you say at this point then, and let me actually jump back to your site again, because I have to give you props because as I mentioned earlier, you've got this position statement already. You already have one. A lot of photographers don't even have one to begin with. But then secondly, you have it there prominently above the fold. And for anybody listening in or watching who doesn't know, above the fold just simply means that whatever exists above this line here, I don't have to scroll to see it. This line at the bottom of my browser, that is the fold. And if I have to scroll to find that text, obviously it's going to be problematic. We want somebody to be able to see that position statement immediately when they land on the site. And Sunshine, I think you've done this maybe better than anybody that we've had on these particular episodes. It's right there. And you are using a script font, which a lot of times doesn't work. In this case, it is I guess an easy enough script font, and the font is large enough that it can be read. So it works. But it's above the fold. That's really great. Capturing genuine moments naturally. Are you wanting to go a different direction as far as the position statement goes? Are you wanting to shift your business? What's the reasoning for the conversation today?
Maybe expand upon it because I think our market that I'm in right now is so broad that maybe it is hard to stand out because like you said on the Google search, there's so many photographers and great ones too in the area who are doing the same thing. So I just
And
kind of want to find my standing out
and
part.
when you say they're doing the same thing, they're doing professional photography the same thing? What do you mean by the same thing?
Yeah, we're all shooting in the Smoky Mountains. There's so many people that have permits to shoot in
Okay.
the mountains. So
Okay. Is that a public list? Are you able to get on and see who has one?
I think you can, and I know the park rangers keep an updated list with them at all the time.
Yeah.
Because if you're shooting in the park and then a ranger comes up to you and you don't have a permit, it's a fine. It's a federal fine. So
Wow.
yeah, you need to have a permit, and then we had to actually register to get our EIN from the IRS,
Yeah.
and I have to get insurance. So I'm like fully there.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing it right, but that's just fascinating to me how serious that area is about these
It is.
permits.
Yeah, and the lady who I guess controls it takes it very seriously. She'll send out periodic emails like if certain places are being overused or they notice that people are going off trail a little bit, they'll send out emails warning everybody. So they take it pretty serious.
Okay. Well, at least you got your bases covered in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, what I want to do then is, speaking of those other photographers in your area, let's take a look and see what it is that they're saying regarding their position statement, if they even say anything about it. And part of the way that we determine what direction to go, it's one thing to say as an individual or as a photographer, I like such and such. In fact, a lot of photographers do this. A lot of photographers, as they're either getting ready to start a business or maybe are into their business but trying to figure out what to do next, they have a hard time making a decision about what to do. And a lot of times I think they overcomplicate it because they make it about how they feel versus simply looking at the market. Now, we don't have to be either or. We could take both into consideration, but it would be much easier if we just simply look at the marketplace. What is our competition saying? What are our competitors saying? What services are they offering? If they offer a service similar to mine, how are they communicating that service to somebody? Are they using particular words? What we want to do is develop awareness of what's going on. Number one, just simply awareness. But then secondly, we want to position ourselves in contrast to them or in distinction to them. A lot of photographers kind of copy and paste, unfortunately. They're just used to seeing these words, so they use a lot of the same words. They use a lot of the same Photoshop action or Lightroom presets, or a lot of the same copy and text. A lot of the same words, I will say, a lot of the same copy. And I'll read some of the examples here in just a little bit. But the goal here is to become aware of what others in our marketplace are doing and then do something different. And that's the goal. So as a photographer, like right now, if I were to start a wedding photography business here in the Chattanooga market, I know what brand position I would run with, not because I just randomly made something up, but because I know the opportunity exists based on my awareness of what the rest of the market is doing. I know the messaging. I'm familiar with the messaging that most of them are using. And so I can easily come out with a position statement, a message, and ultimately marketing efforts that are going to make me stand out because they're unique. They stand in contrast to the marketplace. So in order to do that, I mentioned Google earlier. I Googled a couple of different phrases based at least partially on the feedback that you gave me. You told me what you were searching. Let me actually pull these up. And of course, we're not going to mention any business names tonight, not trying to throw anybody under the bus. But I did want to, I actually typed out some of the examples that I saw. And speaking of this license that everybody is so obsessed with, I did a search. First of all, I did a search. And you know what? Actually, what I will do is I'll pull this up because this is kind of interesting. And this might be helpful to you, Sunshine, as well, in your ongoing research, not just in the conversation tonight or in the next couple of days as you're thinking about your position statement, but tools that you can use to develop awareness of your marketplace and thinking about SEO as well. There is a tool actually called Keywords Everywhere. And I've mentioned this in the past. Keywords Everywhere. This is a browser extension or a plugin that I'm using on Google Chrome. I use Google Chrome. And Keywords Everywhere is the name of it. It's free. There's certain functionality that you ultimately do have to pay for. But Keywords Everywhere is interesting. When I do a search for Smoky Mountain Photographer, it shows me an average or a rough estimate of about 260 searches a month for that particular phrase. In contrast to Photographers Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is 590 a month that are searching that particular phrase. Now, by the way, the reason that I know that is this additional tool over here on this side, this browser, related keywords, again, from Keywords Everywhere, and it shows related keywords or related key phrases and the estimate of the volume that those particular key phrases are getting. So Photographers in Gatlinburg got number 1, Gatlinburg Photographers number 2, and then Pigeon Forge Photographers was underneath that. And then there's some others that kind of trickle off of that. But that's just a really great little tool, and I'd highly recommend it for yourself as well as others listening in. And I think you'll find that super helpful. But let me actually jump to some of these position statements, and I won't read through all of them. I don't want to make you sit through it, nor do I want anybody else to have to sit through it.
I probably read through all of them.
You may have.
Yeah.
So, but just we were talking about that license. Literally the first one that I came to. By the way, these are organic results. I don't click on any of the paid ads to see the results, largely because I don't want the photographers to have to pay for me clicking through their ads. But what I want to see is what your potential clients are going to organically find in a Google search result. So the first thing that popped up, or the first statement, a team of licensed Smoky Mountain photographers. Like that was the position statement. I was like, wow, this must be like super, super important that their position statement is about the license. Okay. The next one was simple, romantic, beautiful. And we talk about using words that are kind of cliche and overused ultimately. It's the last thing that we want to do. It's not going to make us stand out as photographers. So certainly, I mean, I know that you're focused both on families and couples, but we'd want to try to avoid using, at least romantic and beautiful are kind of cliche at this point. Don't want to overuse them. Experience and take home a piece of the Smoky Mountains was another one. And I get what they're saying. It doesn't give me a clear picture of what it is that the photographer does, but this is a nice idea. Wedding and special event experts. Another person said here at, and of course the name of their photography business, we provide many services: photography, wedding planning, web design, and others. They literally said, and other stuff.
Yeah.
Again, not going to throw any business under the bus here, but I thought the actual statement was hilarious because we talk, I mean, obviously brand position is all about specialization. This is about the most opposite from specializing that you can get. Naturally, that's not going to be a really strong position statement. Focusing on true color and real emotion, I provide inspired couples a welcoming, memorable photography experience with empathy and imagination. Now, this is an interesting statement for multiple reasons. They are certainly using very colorful language, which is wonderful, right? I mean, somebody reads that. It's not, the words themselves aren't too hard to understand. We have to think about using words that are going to resonate with our potential clients most easily, right? They don't need to sit and analyze, what do they mean by this word? We're using words that have, multiple meanings depending on the context. We don't need that. We need to be really, really straightforward, really simple, really clear. They're doing that pretty well here, but it's also very colorful language, which is great. But focusing on true color and real emotion, what does, and this is just kind of a theoretical conversation, what is true color? What does that mean to a potential client? What is real emotion? So you mean the emotion that I just expressed when I talked to you, was that real or was that fake? What does true color mean? Is this color true or is this color true? Is that color fake or is that color real? These are words that kind of potentially confuse the client if they even pause for a split second to think about it. Does that make sense? So we want to make sure that we're using messaging that's super clear. And again, you've already done that quite well with your current position statement. So you seem to have a good grasp on this. But for the sake of conversation, I just wanted to point that out. Just a couple of more. I won't read through every one of these. Images that capture the heart and soul of the Great Smoky Mountains. I get it. I don't know what the heart and soul of the Great Smoky Mountains look like. And so for somebody coming from out of state or out of town to visit and they want to hire a photographer, that's a very vague idea. It's very grandiose and it sounds nice, but it's vague. We want something very straightforward, very specific. This other person said specializing in family photography, family reunion photography, high school seniors, cabin and commercial real estate photography, stage and show photography. Again, a wide range, right? And we're not specializing, which is a problem. Now, here's one that was interesting. That's interesting to me. This person literally said pricing, or I think maybe they introduced with their name or something like that. And then pricing starting at $350, all images included, print anywhere. Okay. So they are communicating a pretty clear value proposition to me. It's relatively inexpensive. They can get all their pictures and they can print anywhere. Now, is that a strong position statement? I don't think so, because it doesn't give me a clear distinction between this person and others right off the bat. But what it does communicate is a pretty strong value proposition. And for somebody who's looking for a reasonable rate and they want access to those images and do whatever they want to with them. So it's not terrible. It's kind of interesting to me because I will say most photographers don't run on price. If you're going to run on price, you got to go all in. It's tough. It's tough to compete at a lower price. But for somebody like this to come out and say, hey, you know what? This is my price point. All the images are included. You can print your images. You can take them, do anything you want with them. That's pretty compelling. So just kind of an interesting idea to throw out there. Not encouraging you to do it per se, but just interesting. Smoky Mountain vacation photographers, an experience like no other. Capture the memories you make during Gatlinburg getaway. Storytellers. I'm just scrolling through here. Now, here's what's interesting. This is 7 pages. I looked on the organic Google Map results. I looked on just the regular search results. The only, and I'm just looking through the rest of the only ones that even said the word or the phrase family photographer, I think there was only one. Maybe 2? Yeah, it looks like 1 here as I'm just scrolling through these. So you're in a really interesting position. I also don't see anybody talking about couples. Now, there was 1 or 2 about romance, And then there was another, let's see, 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 about wedding photography. Again, I'm surprised, Gatlinburg being such a wedding hub, that there wasn't more specific language, because there's a massive opportunity for somebody that wanted to specialize in weddings, to hire a really great SEO company to literally own that market if they wanted to, because there's not a lot of strong stuff going on there as far as messaging and it seems SEO is concerned. So just a little side note there. So I guess I'm kind of curious to get your take before we talk about kind of what direction you might go with a position statement. What are your initial thoughts? Just hearing some of those, and I know I didn't read through all of them, but what's kind of your initial impression?
I guess I didn't realize that people weren't mentioning family and couples, but it makes sense because I know when I did my research, obviously through Google, a lot of people specialize but don't specialize, and they do a lot of real estate photography and just random stuff in with it. And when you get into some of these groups that I'm trying to advertise in, that's the thing there is they have a website for like they're a DJ, event planner, and a portrait photographer all in like one website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. The majority of your business is families right now. This is just kind of hypothetical again. What if you were to just go all families? Do you feel like you'd miss out by not photographing couples and just focus, like going all in and being like Gatlinburg's or Smoky Mountain's premier family photographer, like just that being your thing?
No, because I think I would still get those shots that I needed for couples. You know, because I still section off like mom and dad and have them do like the kissing and the romantic shots too. Yeah. And just like elopements, I keep that on my website even though I don't have prices for it, and I still get inquiries for it. So
interesting. Okay. The only reason I tend to be a bit of a simplicity freak here, and I think it's important, especially when it comes to position statement, that we do specialize. It makes it a lot easier, right? If we're not having to juggle 2 different messages. I think that because of the messaging is so weak for the most part, there are certainly exceptions, but as I'm looking through your competition, and I know I didn't read all the options here, especially for those that are just listening or watching online right now, but there are not very many. I mean, here's another one: photographer, writer, lecturer, and outdoor adventurer. Talk about a wide range, right? And they may not be trying to compete with full-time commercial photographers. I'm not sure, but there was a wide variety, but nobody's owning the family space. Like nobody's truly owning family photography in Gatlinburg. And shout out, by the way, to Fuel Your Photos. And I'm going to actually pull this up because, Sunshine, you might even want to take advantage of this. I'm pulling this up here really quick. My friend Corey Potter, who's actually done quite a bit of help for us at Photographers Edit with SEO work, and we're also applying what we've learned from him to other brands as well. But Fuel Your Photos, and we've had Corey actually on the podcast some time ago. We can even link to those or to the episode in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But yeah, Corey and Dylan actually both came on the show. Corey, we've been working with specifically. If you were to work with Corey, for example, or Corey and Dylan, to build out that your SEO efforts, specifically as it relates to family photography in that market, there could be a really interesting opportunity to just really own that.
Yeah, I watched the episode with both of them in it. I know I need to do
SEO
did?
Okay,
stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I watched that episode. I know I really need to do SEO work.
It's amazing. Yeah. And one of the things that, what we found, and I was actually just chatting with Corey earlier today too, and we're having a similar conversation, but what's really interesting about SEO, it seems like in many cases, is that the things that need to change or that need to happen they surprisingly take, well, I guess relative to the impact that they make, relatively little effort. Sometimes it's just a few key things that we're not doing quite right. And then once you make those changes, the impact is massive. And we've seen this. I mean, firsthand, I've seen this even in recent months. It's really, really incredible. So I would highly recommend reaching out to those guys, and I can give you some more direct contact info. For anybody who's listening or watching, though, just make sure you actually go to fuelyourphotos.com. They've got an SEO course, and then those that actually take the SEO course get a discount on their consulting services as well, the one-on-one consulting services. So I highly want to recommend those guys. It's tough finding good SEO resources because there's so many people that are doing it. And you want reliable information. You want to work with reliable individuals as well. And I can't recommend Corey and Dylan there at Fuel Your Photos enough. So little plug for them. They certainly didn't ask for it, but we just had some really great results. And especially in the position that you're in right now, Sunshine, I mean, you could really, really come out and own that marketplace, especially as it relates to family photography. And to that end, let me just kind of keep the conversation going here as we're getting close to the hour mark. One of the ways, and let me just, I'll list a few ways that you can actually create a little bit more of a distinct brand position or establish a clear and distinct brand position. And of course, not just for your sake, but for everybody's listening in and watching. The first thing to do is to be the first to own a position. So I mentioned this earlier, actually, as an idea. Nobody's really owning the wedding photography space. If somebody were to come out and say, I am Gatlinburg's premier wedding photographer, like you land on their site and that's what they saw. And then, by the way, you can't just make a statement. You have to follow through on that. And now they've got to work their butt off to actually back up that statement. But, and of course, that would come as a result of a variety of efforts, both marketing directly to clients, but also working with businesses in the area and developing relationships. There'd be a lot there. But if somebody were to actually come out and own that space, oh my word, again, being only second only to Vegas, incredible opportunity. But you got to actually be the first person to own that and then back it up. Secondly, to offer a service that doesn't exist. Now, in your situation, of course, you already know what genre you're going after, and there's obviously opportunity to do so. But for a photographer who's just getting started, they might look for, in the market that they're in, if they see that there's a particular service not being offered, they could go that direction. So that's the second way to establish a clear and distinct brand position. Third would be to offer a variation of a service. And then fourth would be to name a target market. So I might say, I'm a Chattanooga wedding photographer. That doesn't make me distinct. But if I'm a Chattanooga wedding photographer for skateboarders, now I'm creating distinction because I am specifically building my business to serve a particular segment of the market. Now, I think you're in an interesting position to do number one, which is to be the first to own a position. Very much like we were talking about with wedding photography. You could be the family photographer in that area. Sure, there are others who offer that service. But at this point, based on the research, and by the way, people are coming in from out of town. How are they finding a photographer? They're looking online. So they're looking through the same thing that you and I have, and nobody's owning that family photography space right now. There's incredible opportunity to do just that. So it's that number one. It's that being the first to own the position in the area and then back up that message with not only your work, but the service, the experience, I think is really interesting. By the way, for the sake of, well, and I'll just leave it at that. Any thoughts on that initially?
No, yeah, I think I probably should go that way. Because I am wanting, I think, to go full time, obviously, if I can financially be ready to,
And by the way, I don't think right now you're not ranking. So on the search under Gatlinburg photographer, I did well, no, but so hear me out though. Gatlinburg photographer, I did a search and you came up, I think you were maybe on the first page, maybe the second page. On the other search, the Smoky Mountain photographer, I didn't see you on those first three or four pages.
No, that's
or so.
pretty cluttered.
Yeah.
And I think part of it has to do with, I obviously live in Gatlinburg, so the only way to verify a Google address is having it sent to a mailbox, and I obviously don't want my home address listed on Google.
Sure.
So I kind of had to mark my service areas, and I think that's also a reason why it's not ranking me at all.
Interesting.
Either.
Okay.
Yeah.
I certainly don't claim to be an SEO expert, so I'm going to defer to Corey and Dylan over at Future Photos. And again, they didn't ask me to plug them. I want to because I've had such a good experience with them. But all that to say, I would suggest reaching out to them, Sunshine, because they could probably actively help you rank more easily. And it may take a little bit of time, a little bit of work, certainly. But I think there's really great opportunity there because I don't know that you have super strong competition when it comes to SEO. And if they can help you with your SEO, and then you back up that service, of course, with an incredible experience, which, by the way, is highlighted by that quick turnaround time. Now you can also tie into Google and get the reviews in addition to whatever reviews you might be getting on Yelp. And people are going to be searching and looking for those kinds of reviews, and you're going to come to the top. I mean, 48-hour turnaround time. Somebody's in town for a weekend, or they're in town for a week for vacation. And they can have a session and get the photos back in the time that they're there. And they
can post it on Facebook. That was my kind of 48 hours. Is most people want to share their vacation so they can get all their images edited in between that time. Most people love it. So.
Well, and here's what's in. Okay, so let's get back to a position statement, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a suggestion or two if you're open to it.
Yeah.
You could start with something and. So a couple of different things. One, we do want to think about the marketplace that you're calling out and the keywords that you're using as it relates to that marketplace. There seems to be a bigger search volume for Gatlinburg, But then Smoky Mountains, as you said, is a pretty cluttered space as well. There are plenty of people that are going there. So again, this might be some help that the guys over at Fuel Your Photos can help. Something that they can do to help you narrow down which keywords and key phrases are going to be most relevant to use. And this is going to then ultimately, it's the interesting thing about a position statement is you can communicate what it is that you offer and use that. And that certainly will play into your SEO efforts, but they can also help you build, subtext and write additional copy that will help prop you up as well. So we don't have to try to fit every keyword and every key phrase in your position statement. There's no need to do that. We want to, at the very least, communicate what service you offer, how it's different from other people, and potentially call out the marketplace. So you can start with something as simple as Gatlinburg's premier family photographer, just as an example. And when we say premier, you're theoretically, just conversationally here, if we say premier, you're saying, hey, I'm number one. I'm it. Like, if you want family photography in Gatlinburg, I'm the person you come to. And I think it's, honestly, I like taking a leap and then building my wings on the way down a lot of times. I'm a little crazy like that. But it's kind of fun to set that out there and then reach to it, to make it happen, right? Your photographic talent is obvious. It speaks for itself on your website. Truly beautiful work. Classic work too, by the way. I love that it's not over processed and it's not some crazy trendy looking thing. It's just beautiful work. So it's really well done. But now you get, if you're to make a statement like that, you put that out there and then you back it up. And so that's just something interesting to consider. You could go with something very simply like Gatlinburg's family photographer. You don't have to put premier in there. You can just say, I am the family photographer of Gatlinburg, or I'm Smoky Mountains family photographer. It's gutsy. Like, go out there and just call it as it is and then back it up with the service and the experience. I think it's something to do. You could say Gatlinburg or Smoky Mountains family portrait photographer. Get a little bit more specific, thinking about keywords as well. Portrait photography for Gatlinburg couples and families. And again, don't write this in stone. It could be Gatlinburg or Smoky Mountains, interchangeable potentially. Something you also might talk about with the SEO specialist. Heartwarming, if you want to talk about being warm, because your work really is heartwarming. Portrait photography for couples and families in Smoky Mountains, another example. So those are just a few examples, and you could kind of mix and match words and put one here and move it over here and do this thing. But all you're really doing is calling out a marketplace and the service that you're owning, and then you got to go own it. And it's really as simple as that. And again, part of the reason that you can do that here is that you just don't have competition when it comes to strong brand position messages. Number one, not a ton of competition, just in general. But then certainly when it comes to family photography, I'm blown away actually at how weak the messaging is as it relates to that. You could jump in that space and own it. And again, you get some help with the SEO just to back that up, and then add in as subtext 48-hour turnaround time. Oh my word. I mean, what a massive value proposition. You could work that into the messaging somewhere. But this is a great example of where, as photographers, we don't need to make it cute. We don't need to make it pretty. We don't need to try to, make them have goosebumps with the words that we're using. We're just being really straightforward, saying, this is a service that I offer, where I offer it, why it's different if need be. In this case, you don't even need to say why it's different, because nobody's really standing on this hill of, I am the Smoky Mountain family photographer. I'm Gatlinburg's family photographer. You can own that space. And you can absolutely go full-time owning that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, I know I need to work on my SEO and stuff, which I've done all that. Like, everything I've done so far has just been by myself. So I'm at the point that, which is why I reached out with the brand consultation, because I asked my husband, I was like, I think I need someone else to, look at it who's experienced, because my husband knows nothing about photography. He does what he can to help me, but...
Sure. Well, this is just as one person's perspective, but I've been in the industry a long time, and certainly I've spent a lot of time around this topic the last 2 or 3 years. And I think you're just looking again at your local marketplace. There's really great opportunity just to be really simple, straightforward, simple, call it what it is, and then just own that space. And again, if you get some help with Air SEO and you start ranking for that, and now families coming to vacation, they're seeing you on that first page, they're landing on your site. Immediately they're going to be booking you, no question, because the work is beautiful. It's classic. It's going to be something that they want. And you can certainly speak to, I'm going to always encourage that you don't use a ton of copy. There is a balance to be had, of course, as it relates to SEO, but you can communicate the fast turnaround time and really fun experience into some kind of subtext under that brand position statement. And that wouldn't be difficult to do. But starting with that really simple position statement and owning that family space, I think is a great place to go. If you wanted to add the couples piece to it, doing something like portrait photography for couples and families in Gatlinburg or in the Smoky Mountains, you could go that route too. But couples and families, I don't know. If there's not some kind of emotional tie to photographing couples, I think the biggest opportunity or one of the biggest opportunities comes from really specializing. Now, experimentation here, not a bad thing either. And again, talking to Corey and Dylan, they may give you some direction as far as the specificity and whether or not to use two different images, whether or not you could rank for both. I tend to go the direction of simplicity and focusing on one thing. If you feel like you'd still get a ton of business going the couples route, then fitting that in is fine. But for a potential client who lands on your site, if they immediately know you're the family photographer and then you build the whole experience and the SEO and everything up around that, I think you're going to be in a really great place, especially knowing that you're already getting the majority of your business from families.
Yeah, I think my last 5 sessions have been families. So, and they've all been in the mountains too, like actual Smoky Mountain sessions. So
now I'll throw this out as a caveat. If you create a brand that's focused on families and you want to you're like, you know what, this is taking off. I want to do this. And maybe you want to take on associate photographers. There's opportunity right now. Again, just looking at your competition, to create a whole separate brand for couples. You could have a whole separate brand that was geared toward, couples engagement photography, just portrait photography, elopements, weddings. Hire another photographer who likes to work with bigger groups. And now you can create a whole separate brand dedicated to that. My suggestion right now would be to really just hone in on the one thing that you're already doing really well at, that's generating the most revenue, build on that. And if you're happy with that, great. If you want to add to it, then you can always build that second brand and do the additional thing.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
Does that make sense? Cool.
Yep.
Again, your work is beautiful, and I have to give you props. And for everybody who's listening in, we'll jump back to Sunshine's website here really quick. Make sure to follow Sunshine. It's just naturalsunshinephotography.com. And then on Instagram, Natural Sunshine Photos. Again, just beautifully vibrant images. It's really, really lovely. And at the end of the day, Sunshine, I got to say too, like trends are fun and cool, and certainly I play into them at times as well. But when somebody's able to look at their image and it looks good now and it looks good in 10 years, and they're not looking at that and being like, why in the world did I just add selective color or, this weird effect, or what was the photographer thinking? A lot of these film presets over the last few years are doing the weirdest things to skin tones. And I don't understand how photographers are looking at that and they're okay with that. It's kind of mind boggling. I love that you're keeping it straightforward. It's just really warm and inviting imagery. And I encourage you to stick with that. Again, having been in the industry long enough now, I know what comes and goes. Stick with it and focus on the experience, because if you can turn it around 48 hours and really build on that family business that you've got going there, I think you're going to be golden.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody, I appreciate you joining me here. Wow, look at this, Sunshine. We nailed it. Almost an hour exactly on the mark. Thanks everybody for joining in this evening, hanging out with us on a Tuesday evening. As I said, make sure that you follow Sunshine, naturalsunshinephotography.com. Shoot her a DM, encourage her, tell her to go for it. Own that family photography space there in the Smoky Mountains and Gatlinburg area. And Sunshine, thanks so much for letting us share the conversation with everybody as well. This has been fun.